What if surviving hard times isn't about being strong, but about doing a few small things most people never think to do? Because the truth is, hardship doesn't just test your bank account or your schedule, it tests your identity. It makes you question who you are when life stops cooperating. And here's what's wild. Two people can go through the same storm, same loss, same pressure, same uncertainty. Yet one slowly collapses while the other somehow stays standing. Not because they have a perfect mindset, but because they've learned the art of surviving, how to protect their mind, conserve their energy, and keep moving without breaking. In the next 2 minutes, I'll share the survival skills nobody teaches you, what to do when you feel numb, overwhelmed, or like you're running out of hope. If this is the kind of content you need more of, like this video, subscribe and share it with someone who's carrying more than they show. Chapter 1. When the ground falls away, hard times never arrive with an invitation. They do not knock politely or explain themselves. They come like an earthquake under your feet, rearranging the ground you thought was solid and exposing the truth that comfort had hidden. One moment, life feels predictable. The next, the rules change, the lights flicker, and you are forced to confront a version of yourself you have never met. This chapter begins there, not in panic, not in denial, but in the moment where reality demands that you rise or be buried by what you refuse to face. There is a story as old as humanity itself. A person builds their life carefully, brick by brick. Career, relationships, routines, identity. Then something breaks. A job disappears, health fails. A relationship collapses, money tightens, loss arrives. And suddenly, the structure that once defined them becomes a weight they must crawl out from under. In that moment, many believe the hardship is the enemy. They believe survival means getting back to how things were. That belief is what keeps people stuck. Surviving hard times begins with a different understanding. The ground falling away is not punishment. It is exposure. It shows you where you relied on certainty instead of strength, where you borrowed confidence from stability instead of building it within yourself. When everything familiar disappears, what remains is not weakness. What remains is the raw material of resilience. Think of a tree in a storm. Shallow roots are invisible until the wind comes. Deep roots are not glamorous. They are built slowly, unseen, in resistance. Hard times are the wind that reveals whether your roots were growing or merely coasting. This is not a moment to curse the storm. This is the moment to decide to grow downward. The first art of surviving hard times is acceptance without surrender. Acceptance does not mean liking what is happening. It means refusing to waste energy arguing with reality. Pain demands attention. Resistance multiplies it. When you stop asking why this is happening and start asking what is required of you now, something shifts. The mind stops spiraling and starts stabilizing. There was a man who lost everything in a single year. Business collapsed. Marriage ended. Reputation shattered. He spent months replaying the past, rehearsing conversations, blaming himself and others. He was exhausted and going nowhere. One morning, sitting alone in an empty apartment, he finally said out loud, "This is my life right now." That sentence did not fix his problems. It gave him a foundation. From that foundation he could stand. Acceptance creates space. Space allows choice. Choice is power. Hard times strip away illusions. They remove the excess and leave you face to face with what actually matters. When survival becomes the priority, clarity sharpens. You learn quickly what is essential and what was merely noise. This clarity is not gentle, but it is honest. And honesty is the beginning of strength. In the middle of chaos, your mind will try to predict the future. It will imagine worst-case scenarios, permanent failure, endless struggle. This is not foresight. This is fear wearing the costume of logic. Survival requires discipline over attention. You do not need to solve your entire future. You need to manage today. You need to make the next right decision, then the next, then the next. Momentum is built in inches, not leaps. In hard times, small actions are not small. They are anchors. Getting up at the same time every day. Moving your body even when motivation is gone. Eating properly when comfort would be easier. Speaking honestly instead of hiding. These actions send a signal to your nervous system that you are still in control. Control restores dignity. Dignity fuels endurance. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. Survival is not heroic in the way movies portray it. It is often quiet, repetitive, and uncelebrated. It is choosing not to quit when no one would blame you for doing so. It is holding yourself to standards when circumstances would excuse collapse. Discipline during hard times is not about being harsh. It is about being loyal to your future self. There is a dangerous lie that hard times mean you are falling behind. In truth, they often mean you are being refined. Pressure does not destroy what is solid. It reveals what is real. When life removes your safety nets, it forces you to develop muscles you did not know you needed. Confidence built in comfort is fragile. Confidence built in adversity is unshakable. Notice how your inner dialogue changes under stress. This is where survival is won or lost. If your mind becomes a courtroom where you are constantly on trial, exhaustion follows. Replace judgment with instruction. Instead of telling yourself you are failing, tell yourself what to do next. One clear instruction is worth more than 1,000 emotional reactions. Hard times also demand honesty about your environment. Some places cannot support your growth. Some relationships cannot survive your evolution. Survival sometimes requires separation, not because you are superior, but because you are changing. This can be painful. It can feel lonely, but loneliness is temporary. Self-abandonment lasts forever. There will be moments when progress is invisible, when effort feels wasted, when nothing seems to improve. This is the silent phase of growth. Seeds break underground before they emerge. If you quit because you cannot see results yet, you interrupt a process already in motion. Trust the work you are doing, even when the evidence has not arrived. Surviving hard times is not about becoming numb. It is about becoming steady. You still feel fear, sadness, anger, grief, but these emotions no longer drive the vehicle. They become passengers, acknowledged but not obeyed. You learn to move forward while carrying weight. This is strength. As this chapter comes to a close, let the idea settle that your life has not ended because it has become difficult. It has become demanding because it is shaping you. What would change if you stopped seeing this season as a setback and started seeing it as training? What parts of yourself are being revealed under pressure that comfort never required? And if you knew that surviving this would make you stronger than anything you have faced before, how would you show up today? Chapter 2. Standing still without breaking. In the last chapter, you stepped into the moment when the ground gave way and learned that survival begins with acceptance, discipline, and steady movement forward. You saw that hard times are not an ending but an exposure. revealing the strength that comfort never demanded. Now, the challenge deepens. Once the initial shock fades, a quieter battle begins. The long stretch where nothing seems to change and endurance becomes the test. There is a phase of hardship that few talk about honestly. It is not the collapse itself, but the stillness afterward. The days where you wake up, do the right things, and go back to sleep with no visible progress. No breakthroughs, no applause, just repetition. This is where most people break, not because the pain is unbearable, but because the meaning becomes unclear. Standing still without breaking is an art. It requires patience without passivity and effort without immediate reward. This is where survival transforms from reaction into character. The storm may have knocked you down, but now you are on your knees in the mud, deciding whether to stay there or rise slowly, deliberately, even when your legs shake. Think of a long-distance runner hitting the wall. The body screams to stop. The mind invents reasons to quit. Yet the race is not lost in the sprint or the start. It is decided in that quiet middle stretch where discomfort is constant and motivation is gone. The runner who survives is not stronger. They are steadier. They accept the discomfort as part of the terrain rather than a sign of failure. Hard times stretch time itself. Days feel longer. Progress feels slower. This distortion tempts you to measure your worth by outcomes you cannot yet control. Survival requires a shift in measurement. You stop asking whether things are improving and start asking whether you are showing up correctly. Did you act with integrity today? Did you keep your standards when no one was watching? Did you do the work you said you would do, even when the reward was invisible? This shift is subtle but powerful. When you tie your self-respect to effort instead of results, you reclaim stability. Results fluctuate. Effort is yours. In seasons of hardship, effort becomes the currency of dignity. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you reinforce the identity of someone who does not collapse under pressure. There is a danger in waiting for motivation to return. Motivation is a visitor, not a resident. In hard times, it often leaves without explanation. Discipline stays. Discipline does not care how you feel. It cares what must be done. When emotions are unreliable, routines become lifelines. They reduce the number of decisions you must make and preserve energy for what truly matters. One woman found herself suddenly alone after years of building her life around someone else. The silence was suffocating. She wanted to escape it, to fill it with noise and distraction. Instead, she built structure, morning walks, fixed meal times, evening reading. None of it felt inspiring, all of it felt grounding. Months later, she realized something had changed. She no longer feared being alone. She had learned to stand still without falling apart. Survival also demands restraint. In pain, the impulse is to make dramatic moves, to burn everything down and start over. Sometimes change is necessary. Often, chaos disguised as courage is just avoidance. Standing still does not mean doing nothing. It means resisting the urge to flee discomfort before it teaches you what it came to teach. This is where emotional regulation becomes a survival skill. Feelings rise and fall like waves. If you react to everyone, you exhaust yourself. Instead, you learn to observe, to name what you feel without letting it dictate your actions. Sadness can exist alongside responsibility. Fear can exist alongside progress. You do not wait to feel better to act better. You act better and allow feelings to catch up. The middle of hardship is also where comparisons become toxic. You see others moving forward, celebrating milestones, living lives that seem untouched by struggle. This comparison distorts reality. You are not seeing their private battles, only their highlights. Survival requires narrowing your focus. Your lane is enough. Your pace is enough. Your work is enough. There will be days when the weight feels heavier than your capacity. On those days, survival looks smaller. It looks like not making things worse. It looks like rest without guilt. It looks like choosing nourishment over numbness. Resilience is not always pushing harder. Sometimes it is knowing when to conserve strength. Hard times expose patterns, how you speak to yourself, how you respond to uncertainty, how you treat your body under stress. This exposure is not meant to shame you. It is meant to inform. Awareness gives you leverage. Once you see a pattern clearly, you can interrupt it. You can choose differently, even if only slightly. Slight changes compound over time. One of the most overlooked tools in survival is honesty. Not public confession, but private truth. Admitting where you are without exaggeration or minimization. Saying this is hard, but I am still here. This honesty anchors you. It prevents both despair and false optimism. It keeps you grounded in reality where real progress is possible. As weeks turn into months, something subtle happens. The pain does not disappear, but it loses its sharpness. You become more familiar with it. Familiarity breeds competence. You learn what triggers you. You learn what steadies you. You learn that you can carry more than you thought. This knowledge does not announce itself. It accumulates quietly. Near the end of this stretch, fatigue often returns. Not the dramatic exhaustion of the initial collapse, but a dull weariness. This is when many people loosen their standards, telling themselves they have earned a break from discipline. Rest is necessary. Abandonment is not. The difference is intention. Rest is chosen. Abandonment is drift. This is where recommitment matters. Not a grand vow, but a quiet decision to continue. To recommit to the habits that kept you afloat. To the boundaries that protected your energy. To the values that guided your actions when motivation disappeared. Recommitment renews direction without demanding excitement. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. Standing still without breaking changes you. It builds an inner stillness that does not depend on external stability. You become less reactive, more deliberate. You realize that survival is not about constant movement, but about refusing to collapse when movement slows. As this chapter settles, consider what it means to measure progress by integrity rather than speed. What routines are quietly holding you together right now? What standards you have maintained despite exhaustion? And if this season is training your ability to endure uncertainty, how might that strength serve you long after these hard times pass? Chapter 3. Learning to move with the weight. You have already faced the shock of collapse and learned to stand steady in the long, quiet middle. You discovered that effort, integrity, and restraint keep you intact when progress is invisible. Now a different skill is required, not just endurance, but movement, learning how to advance while the weight is still on your shoulders. There comes a moment in every prolonged hardship when standing still is no longer enough. You are no longer bleeding, but you are not healed. The pain has dulled into something familiar, and familiarity brings a dangerous question. Is this my new normal? This is where many people quietly surrender, not by quitting outright, but by shrinking their expectations of life. Survival demands more than endurance. It demands the courage to move forward without waiting for the weight to be lifted. Moving with the weight means accepting that conditions do not need to be perfect for progress to begin. Strength is not the absence of burden. Strength is learning to function under it. Think of someone carrying a heavy pack on a long journey. They do not wait for the pack to disappear. They adjust the straps. They redistribute the load. They learn how to walk differently. This is adaptation, and adaptation is intelligence under pressure. Hard times teach you economy. You stop wasting energy on what does not matter. You choose your moves carefully. Every step must justify its cost. This is not fear. This is precision. You become more intentional with your time, your words, your commitments. You stop trying to do everything and focus on doing what matters well. One man, buried in financial stress, realized he could no longer afford the luxury of distraction. He stopped numbing himself with constant noise and entertainment. Evenings became quiet, uncomfortable, productive. He learned new skills, not because he felt inspired, but because necessity sharpened his focus. Months later, the situation had not fully resolved, but he had changed. He was more capable, more confident, more grounded. The weight had trained him. Survival evolves when you stop asking how to escape and start asking how to operate. Operating under pressure requires systems. Simple systems, clear priorities. When life is heavy, complexity collapses. You simplify your days. One main objective, a few non-negotiable habits. Everything else becomes optional. This simplicity is not deprivation. It is clarity. Fear will still speak. It will warn you not to risk, not to hope, not to try. Fear wants preservation, not progress. You acknowledge it without obeying it. You learn the difference between reckless action and calculated movement. Reckless action seeks relief. Calculated movement seeks alignment. One creates chaos. The other creates momentum. Momentum under hardship feels different. It is quieter, slower, less visible, but it is real. Each small win compounds. Each completed task restores trust in yourself. Self-trust is often the first casualty of hard times. Rebuilding it requires evidence. Evidence comes from action, not dramatic gestures, but consistent follow-through. Moving with the weight also means redefining success. Success is no longer about speed or recognition. It becomes about sustainability. Can you keep going without burning out? Can you grow without self-betrayal? Can you improve your position without sacrificing your values? These questions guide decisions when external metrics fail. There is also grief in this phase. Grief for the version of life you thought you would have by now. Grief for timelines that no longer apply. This grief does not disappear by ignoring it. It softens when you let it exist alongside forward movement. You do not have to resolve the past to build the future. You only have to stop letting the past decide your next step. As you move, you will notice resistance from unexpected places, from people who preferred the old version of you, from habits that no longer fit, from internal voices that benefited from your stagnation. Resistance is not a sign you are wrong. It is often a sign you are changing. Growth disrupts patterns. Patterns resist disruption. One of the most powerful shifts in survival is learning to ask better questions. Not why did this happen, but what is this teaching me about my limits and my capacity? Not when will this end, but how can I become stronger while it lasts? Questions shape perception. Perception shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcomes. You also learn to conserve hope wisely. Blind optimism collapses under pressure, but disciplined hope endures. Disciplined hope is not expecting miracles. It is believing that your actions matter, even when the results are delayed. It is choosing to invest effort today because future you deserves the return. Moving forward does not mean you stop resting. Rest becomes strategic. Intentional, you rest to recover, not to avoid. You protect your sleep. You nourish your body. You guard your attention. These are not luxuries. They are infrastructure. Without them, movement collapses. There will be setbacks, days when you misstep, when old habits resurface, when fatigue wins. These moments do not erase progress. They test your response. Do you spiral into self-criticism, or do you correct course and continue? Survival is less about perfection and more about recovery speed. As time passes, you begin to notice a quiet pride, not arrogance, pride rooted in evidence. You have endured, you have adapted, you have moved forward while carrying more than you thought possible. This pride stabilizes you. It reminds you that you are not fragile, even when circumstances are. Hard times often reveal talents you never needed before. Problem solving, emotional regulation, resourcefulness, leadership under pressure. These skills remain long after the hardship passes. They become part of your identity. You are no longer someone who survived something difficult. You are someone who knows how to survive. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. As this chapter closes, reflect on how you are carrying the weight right now. What adjustments have made movement possible? What systems are supporting you when motivation fades? And if this season is teaching you how to operate under pressure, how might that ability redefine what you believe you are capable of becoming? Chapter 4. Rebuilding identity in the fire. You have learned to accept the collapse, to stand steady when nothing seemed to change, and to move forward while still carrying weight. Endurance has become skill and movement has become intentional. Now the deeper transformation begins, the rebuilding of who you are while the fire is still burning. Hard times do more than disrupt circumstances. They disrupt identity. They strip away titles, roles, routines, and labels you once used to explain yourself. When those disappear, a quiet panic often follows. If I am not who I was, then who am I now? This question can either fracture you or forge you, depending on how you answer it through action. Most people build identity on outcomes: success, stability, approval, productivity. When those vanish, the sense of self collapses with them. Survival at this stage requires a different foundation. Identity must shift from what you have to who you are becoming. This is uncomfortable because becoming is unfinished. It offers no immediate proof, but it offers freedom. Rebuilding identity begins with values under pressure. Not the values you admire in theory, but the ones you practice when no one is watching and nothing is guaranteed. How you treat people when you are stressed. How you speak to yourself when you fail. How you act when effort feels pointless. These moments are not side notes. They are the core of who you are becoming. There was a woman who had always defined herself as capable, admired, and needed. When her life unraveled, those affirmations disappeared. For months she felt invisible and useless. Slowly, through small choices, a new identity emerged. She became someone who showed up even when unseen. Someone who told the truth even when it cost comfort. Someone who kept promises without applause. The loss did not destroy her identity, it purified it. In hardship, ego often fights survival. Ego wants to preserve image. Survival requires humility. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking less about yourself. It is focusing on what needs to be done rather than how you are perceived. When ego loosens its grip, learning accelerates. This phase also exposes false standards you once lived by. Standards borrowed from others. Timelines imposed by comparison. Definitions of success that no longer fit your reality. Rebuilding identity means consciously choosing which standards remain and which must be released. Not everything you once chased deserves your energy now. You may notice a shift in your tolerance. You tolerate less nonsense, less distraction, less misalignment. Hard times sharpen discernment. When energy is limited, you spend it carefully. This is not bitterness. It is maturity forged under constraint. You are learning what deserves access to your life. Rebuilding identity also means renegotiating your relationship with failure. Failure no longer defines you. It instructs you. Each setback becomes data, not a verdict. This mindset does not eliminate disappointment. It prevents paralysis. You learn to extract lessons quickly and move forward without self-punishment. There is also an unexpected loneliness in this stage, not because people disappear, but because you are no longer the same person they relate to. Your priorities shift. Your conversations change. This can feel isolating, but it is often temporary. Alignment attracts alignment. As you rebuild, new connections eventually form, rooted in who you are now, not who you were. Identity rebuilt in hardship is quieter, less performative, more grounded. You stop needing constant validation because you trust your internal compass. This trust does not appear overnight. It grows each time you choose alignment over approval. One of the most powerful practices in this stage is deliberate self-definition. Not affirmations shouted into a mirror, but decisions repeated in behavior. You define yourself by how you act when tired, how you respond when triggered, how you follow through when no one checks. Identity is not declared, it is demonstrated. Hard times also reveal the difference between confidence and certainty. Certainty depends on predictable outcomes. Confidence depends on self-belief under uncertainty. When you rebuild identity on confidence, you become adaptable. You no longer need guarantees to move. You trust your ability to adjust. This identity shift changes how you see the future. Instead of hoping life becomes easy, you begin trusting yourself to handle whatever comes. This is a subtle but profound shift. It reduces anxiety. It increases courage. You stop asking for lighter loads and start trusting stronger backs. As identity solidifies, boundaries strengthen. You say no more easily. You protect your time more fiercely. You disengage from cycles that drain you. These boundaries are not walls. They are filters. They allow what supports your growth and block what undermines it. There will be moments of doubt. Old identities do not release quietly. They whisper that you were better before, happier before, more impressive before. These whispers are echoes, not truths. Growth often feels like loss before it feels like gain. Stay with the process. Rebuilding identity does not mean rejecting your past. It means integrating it. You carry forward the lessons, not the limitations. You honor what you survived without being trapped by it. The past becomes context, not constraint. As you move through this phase, you may notice an increase in self-respect, not because life has improved, but because you have. Self-respect is born when actions align with values under pressure. It is one of the most durable rewards of hardship. Eventually, you realize something quietly powerful. You are no longer waiting to return to who you were. You are becoming someone new, someone steadier, someone more deliberate, someone forged rather than assembled. This realization does not come with fireworks. It comes with calm. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. As this chapter settles, consider how your identity is shifting under pressure. What values are emerging as non-negotiable? What old standards no longer fit? And if this season is forging a version of you that can endure uncertainty with integrity, how might that redefine not just how you survive, but how you live? Chapter 5. Turning pain into direction. Up to this point, you have learned to accept collapse, endure stillness, move under weight, and rebuild identity in the fire. You are no longer reacting blindly to hardship. You are shaping yourself within it. Now comes a pivotal shift, learning how pain stops being something you merely survive and starts becoming something that guides you forward. Pain without direction drains you. Pain with direction sharpens you. Hard times generate enormous energy, emotional, mental, physical. When that energy has no aim, it turns inward and corrodes. When it is directed, it becomes fuel. The difference between bitterness and wisdom is not what you went through, but what you did with the pressure it created. Many people believe the goal is to eliminate pain as quickly as possible. Relief becomes the obsession, distraction, numbing, escape. But relief without growth simply resets the cycle. Direction requires a different question. Instead of asking, "How do I make this stop?" you begin asking, "How do I use this?" This question does not romanticize suffering. It redeems it. Pain reveals patterns with ruthless clarity. What you avoid, what you tolerate, what you chase when you feel empty. These patterns were always there. Hard times simply remove your ability to ignore them. Direction begins with noticing these patterns without defensiveness, not judging them, studying them. There was a man who realized that every time life became uncertain, he overworked himself into exhaustion. He called it discipline. In truth, it was fear disguised as productivity. Burnout followed every crisis. Once he saw the pattern clearly, direction emerged. He learned to work steadily instead of desperately. The pain taught him where his balance was broken. Direction also comes from boundaries forged by pain. After certain experiences, you know what you will no longer accept. Not because someone told you, but because your nervous system learned the cost. These boundaries are not reactions. They are corrections. They align your future with the lessons of your past. Hard times also clarify purpose, not in grand declarations, but in quiet commitments. You may not know exactly where you are going, but you know what you stand for now. You know what kind of work matters, what kind of relationships are worth effort, what kind of life feels aligned rather than impressive. Direction does not require certainty. It requires orientation. Orientation means you know which way is forward, even if the destination is unclear. You choose actions that move you toward integrity, competence, and contribution, away from numbness, chaos, and self-betrayal. This compass becomes invaluable when external markers are unreliable. Pain also sharpens empathy, not the performative kind, but the grounded kind. You listen differently now. You recognize struggle without needing explanations. This empathy is not weakness. It is awareness born from experience. When directed properly, it strengthens leadership, connection, and service. Turning pain into direction also requires letting go of the fantasy of fairness. Hard times are rarely distributed evenly or logically. Waiting for fairness keeps you stuck. Direction comes when you accept that meaning is not given. It is created through response. You do not control what happened. You control what it becomes. This stage demands responsibility without self-blame. Responsibility says this is my life to shape from here. Self-blame says this is my fault and I am broken. One empowers, the other paralyses. Direction grows when responsibility is paired with self-respect. You may notice a growing intolerance for wasted time, not in a frantic way but in a focused way. You become aware that energy is finite. Pain taught you that nothing is guaranteed. This awareness is not morbid. It is motivating. It brings urgency to what matters and indifference to what does not. Direction also means choosing a long-term horizon. Hard times compress your focus into survival. Direction slowly expands it again. You begin planting seeds you may not harvest immediately. Skills, habits, relationships. This is an act of faith not in outcomes but in your willingness to stay engaged with life. There will be moments when anger resurfaces, when resentment flares. This is normal. Direction does not eliminate emotion. It channels it. Anger becomes protection of values. Sadness becomes reverence for what mattered. Fear becomes caution rather than paralysis. Emotions become information instead of obstacles. One of the clearest signs that pain is turning into direction is when you stop telling your story to prove how much you suffered and start using it to clarify what you will do next. The story shifts from justification to instruction, from explanation to alignment. Direction also simplifies decision-making. You stop debating endlessly because your values are clearer. When choices arise, you ask which option strengthens the person I am becoming. This question cuts through noise. It does not guarantee ease. It guarantees coherence. As direction forms, confidence changes again. It is no longer built on survival or endurance alone. It is built on intentionality. You know why you are doing what you are doing. This why stabilizes you when results lag. Purpose absorbs frustration. You may still feel tired. Direction does not erase fatigue, but it makes fatigue meaningful. Effort feels invested rather than wasted. This difference sustains you in ways motivation never could. Turning pain into direction also prepares you for the final shift. The moment when hard times no longer define your days, but their lessons remain embedded in your choices. You are no longer shaped by reaction. You are guided by intention. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. As this chapter comes to rest, notice where pain has already begun pointing you. What patterns have been exposed? What boundaries have solidified? What values have clarified? And if everything you have endured is capable of becoming direction rather than damage, what kind of future might you now be deliberately building? Chapter 6. Choosing who you become after the storm you have walked through: collapse, endurance, movement under weight, identity forged in fire, and pain turned into direction. What once felt like survival for survival's sake has become intentional living under pressure. Now you stand at the edge of a defining choice, not whether hard times will change you, but how deliberately you will carry what they gave you forward. There is a quiet moment that comes after prolonged hardship. Not relief, not celebration, but recognition. You realize you are no longer who you were when this began. Your reflexes are different. Your priorities have shifted. Your tolerance for illusion is gone. This is the moment many people miss because it does not announce itself as an ending, but it is the beginning of authorship. Surviving hard times is not the finish line. It is the initiation. What matters now is not what you endured, but what you decide to do with the strength, clarity, and discipline you built along the way. The storm shaped you. The future is where you use that shape. Some people unconsciously return to old patterns once pressure eases. They loosen standards, abandon hard-earned habits, and drift back toward comfort. Not because they are weak, but because growth feels unfamiliar without pain pushing it forward. This is why choice matters now more than ever. Without crisis forcing discipline, discipline must become self-directed. Choosing who you become means choosing continuity. You keep the routines that stabilized you even when life improves. You keep the boundaries that protected your energy. You keep the habit of acting with integrity even when shortcuts reappear. These choices turn survival skills into life skills. Hard times taught you how to live deliberately, how to measure progress by effort and alignment rather than applause, how to regulate emotion without suppressing it, how to move without guarantees. These are not emergency tools. They are foundations for a strong life. There is also forgiveness required in this stage, not performative forgiveness, but release. Release of resentment toward the past, toward people who disappointed you, toward versions of yourself that did not know what you know now. Forgiveness is not approval. It is the decision to stop dragging weight that no longer builds strength. As you step forward, you will notice a deeper calm, not because life is predictable, but because you trust yourself to respond. This trust changes how you approach opportunity. You no longer chase everything. You choose selectively. You ask whether something aligns with the person you have become, not the person you used to be. Survival sharpened your instincts. Now they guide you. You sense when something is off. You recognize misalignment early. You respond instead of react. This responsiveness is one of the quiet gifts of hardship. It makes life cleaner, decisions simpler, regret rarer. You may also feel called to contribute differently. Pain often awakens a desire to build, protect, teach, or lead. Not from ego, but from understanding. You know what struggle feels like. You know what steady presence can mean to someone in the middle of it. Contribution does not have to be public or grand. It can be as simple as showing up reliably, listening without fixing, modeling discipline through behavior. The art of surviving hard times ultimately becomes the art of living well. Living well does not mean avoiding difficulty. It means engaging life fully without collapsing when it becomes demanding. It means choosing courage over comfort, responsibility over resentment, direction over drift. There will still be challenges, new ones, different ones. Survival did not grant immunity, it granted competence. When the next storm comes, you will recognize it sooner. You will respond faster. You will trust yourself more deeply. This is the compounding return of resilience. As you move forward, remember that strength is not loud. It is consistent. It is waking up and doing what aligns with your values, even when no one is watching. It is choosing long-term coherence over short-term relief. It is honoring the lessons of hardship by refusing to waste them. You are no longer waiting for life to be easy. You are building a life that can withstand difficulty without losing meaning. This is not a defensive posture. It is an empowered one. You engage with ambition again, but without desperation. You pursue goals without attaching your worth to outcomes. The final choice is this. Will you let hard times be a chapter you survived or a teacher you integrated? One fades with memory. The other shapes every decision that follows. Integration is what turns pain into wisdom, endurance into confidence, survival into leadership. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. As this journey closes, let the questions linger naturally, without urgency or fear. Who have you become because you refuse to quit? What standards now feel non-negotiable because you lived without them once? And if you carry forward the discipline, clarity, and self-trust forged in these hard times, what kind of life are you now capable of creating? Not in spite of what you endured, but because of it.